So this lesson is the third lesson. So we've talked about the blood, we've talked about the heart, and now we need to think about how that heart links into the wider organ system, the circulatory system. Again, there is a sheet to complete for this, which I'll direct you to the task as we go through the video. So for grade C, we need to describe the structure of the 3 blood vessels, some of which we've met already. I'm just going to clarify what they are and how they work. And then we've got grade B, describe how blood travels around the circulatory system and explaining how those blood vessels we talked about for grade C are adapted to carry out their function. So the first blood vessel we need to talk about is the artery. Now we've met some of the arteries already when we were talking about the heart. Now arteries transport blood away from the heart. Okay, and that's very important to remember because that can help you sometimes label a diagram of the heart. Okay, so arteries are making blood go away from the heart. Now the blood flow is occurring in the centre here. And you can see that's quite a small opening when you look at the wider blood vessel. We've got this thick muscle inside and we've got this connective tissue on the outside. Okay. The next one is a vein. You can see that the space inside the vein is much larger because the muscle layer around the outside is much thinner. And finally, the capillaries. These are very, very, very thin. They're only 1 cell thick. And as we talked about in the digestive system, that's to allow substances to pass through, which we'll move on to a little bit later. Okay, what I want you to do now is in each of the diagrams, I want you to type into the boxes what each of the blood vessels are. And then in the bigger boxes below, I want you to just make up a few things about their structure. Okay, maybe go back into the video if you need to do that. Okay, so for grade B, we need to describe how blood travels around the circulatory system. Now we can see straight away, if we go back to our diagram of the heart, we've got oxygenated blood leaving the aorta. Okay, now the aorta is an artery, and the reason we know that is because from what we've just said, we've said that the arteries are the blood vessels which transport blood away from the heart. We can clearly see that we've got blood leaving the heart here. Now this is going to the body cells. This is a simplified diagram. We're going to be looking at a more detailed diagram on your sheet in a second. Now, as the oxygenated blood, if you remember, the oxygenated blood is represented as red. As it enters the body cells, on the pathway that blood takes, it's going to be part of respiration. That oxygen is going to be used up in respiration, and a product of respiration, as we know, is carbon dioxide. And that carbon dioxide is now going to be put into the blood. But basically, this blood is going from oxygenated as it passes through the cells to ending up being deoxygenated. So there's now very little oxygen in the blood. This blood now has no use to the cells, so this blood is taken back to the heart, okay? And because it's taken back to the heart in a vein, okay, this vein we know has been called the vena cava, okay? We know that veins take blood back to the heart. Okay, so we know that this blue diagram here, this blue part of the diagram is representing a vein. In particular, coming into this right atria, we know that that's called the vena cava from our heart lesson. Now, the next stage is to get that blood oxygenated again. So we pump the blood out again. Now, this is a vessel which is taking blood away from the heart, and we know that vessels that take blood away from the heart, just like here, were called arteries. And this is the pulmonary artery, if you remember from the heart lesson. So the blood's travelling from the pulmonary artery to the lungs, again deoxygenated, and as it goes through the lungs we know that they will have that gas exchange at the alveoli where the deoxygenated blood becomes oxygenated, and that will then come back to the heart, and we know that that comes through the pulmonary vein because we know that the veins bring blood back to the heart. So again, we've got oxygenated blood through the aorta coming down here to the rest of the body. This can be in any of the organ systems. The oxygen is taken away in respiration, so the blood is now deoxygenated, comes back, okay, and we know that the blood comes back to the heart through a vein. We know this is the the vena cava coming in here, through the atrium, through the ventricle, out, through here, to the lungs, and when it becomes oxygenated, it comes back again. Now you've got a more detailed diagram here of how you can describe the movement of blood through the circulatory system. Okay, so I want you to describe how blood travels through the circulatory system starting at the right atrium. Okay, so remember the right atrium is this one here. Okay, so we're starting with deoxygenated blood. Now you've got some different parts here. We've got the capillaries in the lungs, small intestine, in the leg, and other parts of the body. Okay, you don't need to go into specific detail about all of them, but just be aware that in my diagram previously, this was a simplified diagram talking about the generalized body cells. Obviously, blood goes all around the body to the different systems. Now we need to go back to those blood vessels we've been talking about. So the arteries, then, we said these are the blood vessels which transport blood away from the heart. Okay, and any blood that's moving away from the heart needs to go quite some distance. Okay, so if you're thinking about the blood that maybe needs to go up to your brain, that's got quite a distance to cover. The blood that's got to go down to your feet, that's got quite a distance to cover, and therefore the arteries have to carry blood at quite high pressure. Okay, and because they carry blood at very high pressure, they need a very, very thick, strong wall around them so that they don't burst. Okay, so the arteries have a very, very thick muscular wall. Okay, so that all of the blood that's at high pressure gets contained within there. Okay, this is how the artery is adapted to its function. Now the veins, okay, we know that the veins are much bigger in size. Okay, they allow more blood to flow through. Now inside the vein, the blood goes through under quite low pressure and it moves very slowly. And so there is a danger inside the vein that if we have blood which is being transported, say, from the leg up back to the heart to be oxygenated, that the act of gravity might pull that blood back down. Now, we don't want blood to be pulled down and to group in your feet or in the lower part of your body. And so the veins are adapted in that they have valves, okay, and these valves will prevent the backflow of blood. So the blood is going from, let's say, your leg or a leg muscle tissue up here to where the heart is, and as it's flowing upwards it pushes through a valve, and what that does is that if gravity is then acting, it's very slow moving blood, it's under very low pressure, and therefore if the act of gravity is going to be existing on this, then as soon as the blood tries to go backwards, we're going to have the valve closing, preventing the backflow of blood, just like in the heart. Now the capillaries are the tiny blood vessels. They're only 1 cell thick. We can quite clearly in this simplified diagram see through them. These allow substances very easily to diffuse in and out of the actual blood vessel itself. So we've got useful substances. Now if you think about the useful substances that might be going into a body cell from when we were talking about aerobic respiration, we're going to want things like glucose from the digestive system to be going into there, and things like oxygen. Now the waste products coming out, we've got our carbon dioxide, we've got our water. We're going to put that back into the blood so that that can then be exhaled at the lungs. But the main adaptation of the capillary is that it's 1 cell thick to allow that rapid diffusion. Okay, for task 3 then, you need to explain how each of these blood vessels are adapted to their function. Now this is 2 marks for arteries, 2 marks for capillaries, and then 3 marks for veins, because we're talking about how the veins are wide, the type of blood that we will be getting flowing through those veins, and those function of the valves as well. So I want you to think about that when you're answering the vein question in particular. Now remember, these are explain questions, so you're not just going to be stating some of the facts, and you're not going to be stating some of those key features saying that the arteries have a thick wall. You need to explain why the artery has a thick wall. Okay, so when you've done this, you need to save the sheet as your name and email it back to me so that I can check you've understood.